Here we are, folks. Selection Sunday. It's 1:38 a.m. I got places to be in the morning. I got sleep, and I got a college football playoff selection show to watch and bowl games to keep track of as they are getting announced. Yes, I am here because I am loyal, and this is probably the most, not important, but the most significant video that I've released. That's not a playoff game that I've been broadcasting in the past. This is a video. This will go out, hopefully, to a bunch of people, and you will be able to see my opinion and my view. Mark Rogers TV, guys. You gotta look him up on YouTube. Mark Rogers TV, college football. The voice of college football is not his, that's not his YouTube channel. That's his name. But Mark Rogers TV, one word, college football, two separate words after Mark Rogers TV. This guy will give you a debate. This guy will talk to you guys and actually let you join into the conversation. He also does very good job with getting media from different teams on his show. I really like him, and he let me state my case about this debate, this fourth spot, which we expected to come in today with, except a wild card team. We'll get to that in a bit, though. Number 25, I'm going to hold on with Boise State because they lost by a field goal in a tough game in the Smurf turf that was covered in snow. And I'll be back real quick. I'm going to listen, actually, to this Heather Dinich. All right, again, I just wanted to hear the take of another analyst I haven't heard yet tonight. I've heard a lot of analysts talking to Mark Rogers TV tonight as well, and just getting a general feel about what people believe. So I kept Boise State in there again because they had a close loss at home in the Mountain West Conference Championship game, and I still feel like they're a top 25 team. I just think they're not better than Fresno State. Fresno State really controlled this game, controlled the majority of the game against Boise State the first time around a few weeks back. So give me Boise State's at number 25. Number 24, and I don't think they moved at all, is Missouri at 8-4. I think their body of work is pretty good, and there's no reason to slide them, and I already talked about them last week. Number 23, Northwestern. I kept them in my 25, and I had them a higher value than the College Football Playoff Committee had them. I don't know why they slipped 2 spots. Yeah, they struggled with Illinois, but they pulled starters, and I don't know if they're watching the film or not of Northwestern against Illinois, but they pulled the starters, and that's why that game was so close in the end. They were up like 24-3, 24-7, something like that. I couldn't remember what the score was. And they just pulled their starters because they felt the game was in their control and they could finish it without them. And that's how Illinois had a little surge. Northwestern's a quality team. They showed it tonight, giving a lot of fight against Notre Dame, Michigan, and Ohio State. And we will talk a little more about the Wildcats specifically as an opponent. Number 22, Utah. They lost the Pac-12 championship, and it really wasn't embarrassing, but no offense whatsoever on both sides of the ball. Really good defense. And that's, I think, the reason why there was no offense on either side, because both offenses looked talented. They looked the part. They were able, both sides, to move the ball. Defenses would not let them have any. No offensive touchdowns. A pick 6 is what won the game for Washington. Number 21, Texas A&M, really nothing again to talk about here. They just slide up as these conference championship games are decided, and I think they are a little bit better than some of these other teams. So 21 makes sense. Same with the Hawkeyes at number 20, number 19, Fresno State, and we can talk about them now. Fresno State with a very impressive win moves into my top 20 is because we were waiting for them to get this win. And if they could get this win, they could possibly be, and I think Boise State had a little bit of better argument, but possibly be that representative of the group of five if UCF would have lost today and they were on the ropes. But congratulations to Fresno State. They're going to have a wonderful trip to the Las Vegas Bowl, which is a very good bowl game to watch on the first Saturday. I believe it's going to be on the first Saturday again this year, but it usually is on the first Saturday of bowl season. Very fun to watch that bowl game because you get a couple teams that should be decently even matched up between the Mountain West and the Pac-12. So there's Fresno State at number 19. Number 18, Texas. I dropped them here because I was not impressed with that play calling and just teams sliding ahead of them. I felt like they were really close, and you could have put in any specific order a couple teams, with the exception I had Mississippi State and Kentucky ahead of them. Those two teams I probably wouldn't have considered ahead of them a week ago. I consider them now, and by a narrow margin, I would say they're ahead of them just because they don't really have that that embarrassing loss like Texas has against Maryland. And we want to talk, as I'm going to open up the chat because I see people coming in here. So let me go ahead and mute this real quick, and then we can go to the chat to hear your opinion. But anyway, Texas down here at 18 because they have that embarrassing loss to Maryland, and a lot of people give Ohio State a lot of crap for the Maryland loss. You want to actually talk about Maryland, talk Texas a little bit too, because Texas did in fact lose to Maryland, and I felt like Texas really was a better team than Oklahoma throughout the course. I mean, they had control of that game in the first half. A couple times the ball didn't go their way, and they gave up the lead right before the half. And really, Texas's play calling was very disappointing by Tim Beck on one side of that ball. So Texas at 18. Number 17 is Mississippi State. Really nothing to be said here with the Bulldogs, considering the fact that they did control the Egg Bowl pretty well, like most people really expected them to, and nothing really new to add on. Again, make sure you guys comment my live top 25. Number 16, Kentucky, sitting at 9-3, the first 9-3 team. I still don't think they are a very good team, but I have to slide them up because, again, their embarrassing loss against Tennessee, and they did lose by a good margin, was not a loss where I look at as something that is unfathomable, unlike Texas really losing to Maryland, because Maryland hasn't beaten anyone else. Tennessee kind of became a little bit of a habit with them when they beat Auburn, and that 3 losses. Now, I know Texas has just got their 4th loss. The fact, though, that you do lose to 4 of 12 on your schedule versus 3 of 12 is a little bit different to me. Number 15 is going to be Syracuse, and Syracuse just kind of sliding up, not necessarily because of anything they did, but because of teams ahead of them just kind of falling back. I'm not super impressed. I can't get that sight out of my mind of Syracuse getting dominated by Notre Dame, and Notre Dame team in which I think is overvalued, but they're going to stay in the top 15 or stay in the top 20 and rise up to the top 15, actually. Number 14, the Florida Gators. No movement really here. The Gators are a solid football team. Number 13, West Virginia, and this is just more as a result of breaking down West Virginia's resume. I reacted too much to what I saw from the offense and Will Grier, specifically against the defense that they went up against, and I did not look at the resume, which isn't bad, but it's not great. They really don't have that big of a marquee win, and I think that's what you got to point to in their losses. They do have a loss against an unranked team, a 6-6 team, Oklahoma State, which number 12 does not have, and that would be Penn State, who has 3 losses to Michigan State. They are 7-5, but at the time when they played, and again, at the time only matters when you got injuries in the factor. In Brian Lewerke and Felton Davis were in that game, and it was a last-second play by Brian Lewerke to Felton Davis that actually won that game. So I think with Michigan State being a different team when Penn State played them, that and they lost by 1 to Ohio State and had a bad game against Michigan on the road where the quarterback was hurt, probably the most hurt in that game. Penn State's a quality opponent at 12. Number 11 to LSU. Nothing, again, really to talk about here. I did drop them one spot because I was really impressed with Washington this week, and that defense is tremendous. As you guys go ahead and comment what you think. Just that's the only reason I have to drop LSU out of my top 10. There's really no one else to put at that 10 spot, in my opinion, last week. LSU got the nod last week. This week, I'm going to give it to Washington. Number 10 is Washington, and I was just talking about them. Washington deserves to be in the top 10 after their defensive play, and I don't think they deserve to be above Washington State because, number one, I don't know if they're a better team. Number two, Washington State, at the end of the day, has a better overall record, even though Washington State is at number 9, which Washington, again, great defense. I already said that. Washington State's number 9 ahead of Washington just because of the fact of the record. And maybe I should give Washington the benefit of the doubt. I won't, but maybe I should have just because of the out-of-conference schedule. But the fact of the matter is Washington State does have one less loss than Washington. And look, if you're looking at it, they got similar resumes, and there was a snow game more suitable for Washington. I think these teams really are rather even. So I'm honestly just going to go to the loss column as a tiebreaker since I do believe these two teams are even. The circumstances favored Washington in the weather. Based on the style of play, not an excuse for Washington State, but certainly a reason. I think Washington State should go to New Year's Six regardless of their of whether or not they're ahead of Washington or not in the college football playoff poll, in which they probably won't be. And I get it. I really definitely pondered moving Washington up. I got to give Washington State that edge, though. Number 8 is the Michigan Wolverines, and 8 above UCF. It's a little different than what the college football playoff has, and it was interesting to me because I was in favor of Ohio State based on their wins and based on how emphatic they beat Michigan. And the committee actually valued the two teams that I was impressed with Ohio State winning on the road against Penn State when Penn State was fully healthy, and at home by 23 against Michigan, who was red hot at the time, winning 10 straight. And the committee was higher on the both these teams. I think I had Penn State somewhere around like 13 or 14, and I got them up to 12 just after breaking down the resumes a little more, after a little more thought. So it doesn't line up with Michigan above UCF. I didn't expect from the committee. I expected UCF to be all the way up at 7, and they weren't. So Ohio State actually had a better resume than I expected, and I still like their resume over Oklahoma. Number 7 is going to be UCF at 12-0. And listen, UCF, congratulations on your season. I'm going not to have a hard time to put you in my top 4. And it crushes me because you've won 25 straight and you showed that you could win. But there was a lot of glaring errors that I saw with the Memphis game. Congratulations on your AAC championship. I hope you enjoy it, whatever bowl game it is. I'm really hoping we get to see a Peach Bowl between Florida and UCF, the battle of the state of Florida right there. But nonetheless, UCF at number 7, I think really this is their ceiling this year. They had a much better shot last year, and they probably should have made it last year. Number 6 is Oklahoma, and here we go. I'm not going to spend too much time here. I'm going to reveal 5 and 4 before I really spend a whole lot of time. I am not sold on your defense just because you beat a team in the favor of the refs. That ceiling touchdown, and I know this isn't on the defensive side of the ball. Defense was bad too with the officiating, but this is just an example. Your touchdown to seal it up, you had illegal formation, and it was a 3rd and 10. That would have made it 3rd and 15 in almost. Now, nothing's impossible with Kyler Murray, but almost impossible to convert a first down. And again, comment what you think about this. But it would have been almost impossible to convert a first down. And that changes the demeanor from Texas saying, we got to score as quick as possible, to Texas saying, we got this much time left on the clock. Let's go down and score. So Sam Ellinger does not need to throw a pass inside the 30-yard line, up the sideline, trying to get Colin Johnson, I believe was the intended receiver, on an option route and miscommunicate with him. Look, the fact of the matter is, if they would have got that call correctly on the field, which was illegal formation, we could have been looking at a game that went into overtime, and who knows how that game would have went in overtime. We also may be looking at a similar result, or basically the same end result, which Oklahoma wins. Oklahoma winning by 2 possessions is not indicative of the score of this ball game, and that's why Oklahoma is 6. And number 5 is Georgia, and I really did debate Georgia, Ohio State, and we'll talk more about that. Georgia looked very good today, and they made Alabama look human, and I don't know if you're going to get a better defense against that Alabama team. Alabama just caught them again off guard with the quarterback switch. Now, I know this one wasn't intentional. They wouldn't have done it if they would not have done it at all if Tua didn't get hurt, but Tua got hurt. There was still a quarterback switch. And this is unfortunate, Georgia. Georgia prepares for Jalen, knows there's a possibility for Tua, and has to prepare for Tua, but they don't know how to prepare for Tua because you don't have a left-handed gunslinger who likes to make big plays like that just sitting around. So you really have a hard time scouting Tua, especially with limited film and snaps, so it's a hard time. And then with this case, you really didn't expect Jalen Hurts to get in the ball game, and guess what? He gets in the ball game and he shines because Georgia didn't prepare for him this time around. They prepared for Tua and did a fantastic job in game planning in both of those games, and it's unfortunate to see Georgia lose both those games because, especially last year, I don't necessarily know about this year. You can make the argument too this year, and it looked really like Georgia was a better team on the field than Alabama, and they're not deserving of a playoff spot, and that's why I had to keep them out. Is just because when you're an 11-2 non-conference champion, I just cannot give you. I cannot give you the nod, and it's just really hard for me to do that. And I give them the nod over Oklahoma because their body of work is better than Oklahoma is, and they look like a better team than Oklahoma subjectively. And you could probably say subjectively they are better than Ohio State. I cannot say definitively that they are better than Ohio State, and I cannot say that they have the body of work that Ohio State does. Georgia's 2 losses are to Alabama and LSU, 2 teams who are in the top 11 for my poll. But you have to go all the way back to Kentucky, I believe, for their best win, and I think that's the difference between Ohio State, Georgia. Ohio State and Georgia is how far back you got to go for your best win, despite the fact that Georgia has 2 good losses. Number 4, Ohio State. Now, here we go. Ohio State sitting here at 12-1, Big Ten champions. Number 1, you have to start thinking this is a team you didn't expect them 3 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago to win the Big Ten, and yet they come out on top and win it. And they win it with a 12-1 record, but I also got to say this, and they survived some games, yes. And I also got to say this, though. Number 1, now I know you put Ohio State in over Penn State, but number 1, you left out the Big Ten champion 3. This would be a 3rd year in a row. Can you really do that in the conference that may not be the best in these last 3-year span? Let's just say, for the sake of argument, that's not the best. It's still the 2nd best conference in all of football, and you're going to leave them out of the college football playoff for a 3rd year in a row, or the champion out for the 3rd year in a row. I personally think Ohio State deserved to be in over Penn State that year, but Penn State was the better team, and it showed it, and I was wrong. Ohio State deserved on paper to be in, but if you talk, and they, Penn State did beat them. I always said it was kind of a fluky, but when you look at Penn State, how hot they were. If they would have played Clemson, they probably would have lost because Clemson was a phenomenal team that year. but they would not have gotten beat 31-0. So you're telling me that the last 4 years, the best team in the Big Ten is not making the playoff, and that is supposed to be the second best conference, at the very worst, the second best conference. And yes, I go back to 2015. When you put Michigan State in there, Ohio State lost in a fluky fashion. I think 2015 Ohio State probably should have got in over a 2016 Ohio State scenario-wise, but that's not what happened in the end. We will talk for the next 12 hours about this selection in the college football playoff. And what's going to come up more than anything is 49-20, that 29-point loss on the road to Purdue. And I guess my perspective is a lot different than a lot of people's perspective. But look, call me crazy, but I don't think a one game is a do-all, end-all. And I don't think that you can really look at Ohio State and say, okay, they struggled against Minnesota. Minnesota's a bowl team that Ohio State beat by 16 points. So I'm going to go ahead and mark that off. Okay, you struggled against Nebraska. Yeah, but that game really wasn't in that much of jeopardy when you talk about, who was dominant in that game. You could tell coming off the field that it was Ohio State was better in that game. Nebraska really just kept it close. It was 36-24 very late in that game. Nebraska scored, made it one score, and they attempted, I believe. I can't remember, but I believe they attempted an onside kick. Did they? I can't remember. And really, you can look at Maryland. But I can point, when you're going to talk about Georgia, I think Georgia having 2 losses is a better argument than Oklahoma, to be honest with you. Because you want to talk about Ohio State struggling. Look at Oklahoma. They should have lost to Oklahoma State, who's 6-6. But that's a rivalry game. Fine, you probably should have lost to Army, who completely controls you for 4 quarters of that ball game, who sent you into overtime, and it really just could not win the game because they had to pass the ball. Oh, but Army's a ranked 9-2 team. No, they are not. Do you see them in my top 25? And I think I have them on the outside looking in. But do you see them in my top 25? No. Will you see them in the college football playoff committee's top 25? Highly, highly doubtful. So, quit using the Army is 9-2, good team, ranked. Their best win is Buffalo. Buffalo just suffered a 3rd loss in the MAC. They lost 2 games in the MAC and 1 game to Army, of course. So 2 games to MAC teams, essentially. And you're telling me that the best win is Buffalo, and that's still a quality win for Oklahoma, where you got thoroughly controlled. Army moved the ball 45 minutes, taken off the clock when Army had the football. And you're going to tell me that Oklahoma deserves or doesn't deserve any sort of crap for that? Come on. You're going to give Ohio State crap for winning against Maryland in a game where the offense exploded, in the game where the defense went ahead and stepped up on multiple occasions that was needed in the second half. They were down 14 in the second half. They were down 14 in the first half as well, right before halftime. Came back, made it, and they were down 14 in 3 separate times in that ball game, and they came all the way back, tied up twice. And they ended up winning the game. That's what's important. That's what's important. So if you're going to give Ohio State crap for the Maryland game, you got to have the equalizer here, which is Oklahoma State for Oklahoma. You also had Texas Tech, where you allowed 46 points. Do you remember this game? You allowed 46 points. Kyler Murray threw 2 interceptions early, and Texas Tech probably should have won that ball game as well. So, but it's woulda, coulda, shoulda. Oklahoma did win. That's why they're in the discussion. Ohio State did win. That's why they're in the discussion. So I don't want to hear this whole thing about struggling, because all teams have struggled this year, with the exception, well, even Alabama now, because they struggled against Georgia. All teams haven't had easy wins. All teams have had games where they've struggled. And Oklahoma, honestly, has probably had more games that they've struggled in than Ohio State, as it seems Ohio State struggles every single week. Listen, when you win by 20 points, Ohio State was up by 20 pretty early in that fourth quarter. Ohio State's game wasn't really in danger against Michigan State. It wasn't really, I was at this game, it wasn't really much in danger against Minnesota. Early on, it was close, but Ohio State was up by 9 points in the fourth quarter. They scored a touchdown to really seal the deal to win 30-14. And guess what? No one wants to talk about defense in that game. No one wants to talk about defense in the Michigan State game. And at the end of the day, it's Ohio State, not Oklahoma, who's had 3 different games where they haven't allowed a touchdown. And you want to add on a closing statement. I don't think there is a better closing statement than what Ohio State has had this season. Clemson gave up over 500 yards against South Carolina, so it wasn't them. Notre Dame was all over the struggle bus against USC. They barely pulled away, so it wasn't them. Alabama should have lost against Georgia, and if it wasn't for sparked by backup QB for a second time in a row, they would have lost. So it wasn't them. And they struggled against Auburn and the Citadel, by the way. So Ohio State's last 2 games, guess what they did? They beat a top 10 team by 23 points, hanging 62 up on the number 1 defense, and a team who has played, by the way, this team has played 2 top 10 teams and a playoff team in Notre Dame. Northwestern has not lost a game this year by more than 14 points. The largest deficit was against Duke by 14 points. They lost 21-7. And guess what? Ohio State beat them by 21. The last time that a Pat Fitzgerald team has lost by this wide of a margin, you have to go all the way back to the 2015 season in January 1st of 2016 against Tennessee, where they got absolutely throttled. And that's why I have to give the edge over Oklahoma and Georgia to Ohio State. They have the best closing statement out of anyone in the country, and the fact that we're going to try to ignore that, which in other years we wouldn't ignore that, at the end of the day right now, I just don't understand. Because Ohio State, they did continue what they did against Michigan, and that's what we were saying. Ohio State's got to continue what they did against Michigan. They played a quality opponent. This is disrespectful to Northwestern to say that you're supposed to play that team as if they were Akron. You're supposed to beat them 59-0 like you did a couple years ago. Look, this team does not get blown out. They haven't got blown out since the 2015 season. It's been 3 seasons, and they haven't been blown out. This is a disciplined, very good team, doesn't commit penalties, doesn't make mistakes, yet Ohio State goes up against a team that doesn't make mistakes, wins the turnover margin, has Haskins playing a tremendous game, throwing for 1 yard shy of 500 yards passing in the Big Ten Championship against a team in Northwestern that's notorious for playing a conservative zone. So, hey, at least if you're going to be able to move the ball, you'll move it in short chunks. Yet Ohio State has had multiple plays over 20 yards in this ball game, which Northwestern does not allow. And Haskins buying time, man. He made a Heisman statement. And we'll go ahead and talk about the Heisman here in a bit. And again, I appreciate you guys for tuning in. Make sure you comment what you think about what I'm saying, because I will definitely consider any opinion that has a lot of thought. I haven't really heard the most concise argument about Oklahoma getting into the playoff, because honestly, the only thing that is the difference between Ohio State and Oklahoma, and what I'm hearing that favors Oklahoma, is the loss. And I just am not a subscriber to a loss being the reason why you're left out. And if that was the case, why the heck was Clemson number 1 last year? They had the worst loss out of anyone in the top 4, and Alabama included there, losing to a 4-8 Syracuse team, yet they were the number 1 team last year. A loss is not the do-all, end-all. It hasn't been in the past, and it shouldn't be. I'm not saying Clemson should not have been number 1. I am saying that for other purposes in terms of their lack of resume last year. I was not saying that because of 4-8 Syracuse beating them. So the top 6 should be capped off by number 4 Ohio State, number 5 Georgia, and number 6 Oklahoma. And Oklahoma didn't do anything really today for me to think anything different of them. I think Georgia really made me think anything different, or made me think differently of them in a loss, in which I can say, yeah, you can be considered for that fourth spot. And I really did consider all four teams. I considered Oklahoma because their body of work isn't bad. And Ohio State really showed some stability in terms of they were able to make plays on defense when they needed to, turn the ball over 3 times on defense, made a lot of sacks, got a lot of pressure on the quarterback for the second time in a row, for the second game in a row against quality teams, and was able to score on quality defenses for a second week in a row. We're starting to see consistency from Ohio State. We're starting to see a good team. This is them and Georgia are the 2 teams I wouldn't want to play if I'm Alabama. And that is the biggest compliment of all. And since these are the 2 teams that you probably look at, and this is the thing I'm actually a little bit of an advocate for. If I'm Ohio State, I would love to play Oklahoma right now just to show that you are a better team, because I believe Ohio State is a better team. That's all I'm going to say at this point. I think I stated my case rather strong for Ohio State. I doubt the committee is going to get a hold of this, though. Number 3, Notre Dame, 12-0. No reason for me to drop them. And I'm not going to subscribe to this idea that, hey, since they were off, let's go ahead and drop them. You have every reason to drop Notre Dame to number 5, or even to number 6, quite honestly. You have a lot of reason to do that. I'm going to have a hard time leaving an undefeated out, especially behind a 2-loss non-conference champion who has a pretty decent resume. It's not great, but it's not bad either. They beat Michigan and Northwestern, 2 top 25 opponents, and I believe they beat another one. I can't remember. Syracuse. So they beat 3 top 25 opponents. That's not bad. Number 2, Clemson, obvious reasons. Dominating against Pitt. Good job. Number 1, Alabama. Look, I was actually considering Clemson. But at the end of the day, it's just too hard for me to go ahead and say, hey, Alabama, you struggled against a top 5 team. In my opinion, a top 5 team. You had a good game against a good team. I'm going to punish you. No. I will not do such a thing. Alabama is still the best team in the country. And they deserve to have that number 1, and they deserve to have the privilege of playing one of the teams that we are debating here today. Great win for Alabama. Teams on the outside, I don't have this in a specific order. I kept this the same, didn't edit it, so let me go ahead and say it in the order after. Iowa State struggled with Drake. They're probably the last team on this list. NC State's right in front of them. I went ahead and jumped Stanford because I think is a very good win against Cal. Oregon's right there. Army's right there, and Cincinnati's probably the next team out. So essentially it would go like this: 26 Cincinnati, 27. Let's go Oregon. Oh, now I'm going to go ahead and stick with Army. Just slide them up. 27 Army, 28 Oregon, 29 Stanford, 30 exactly where NC State is, and then where Stanford is would be Iowa State. Now for the Heisman. There are 5 guys I want to see in New York. One of these guys, I don't know if he can make the trip, and I guarantee you that is spoiler. And I'm going to give you my top 10 Heisman lists in full, and I'm going to mention 5 names at the end that deserve to be in. So let's just run through 6 through 10 in order. These are in order from 6 to 7 to 8 to 9 to 10, the guys who just missed my list. And of course, this would be different title for me. So right on the outside looking in would be Gardner Minshew. Or sorry, I said Gardner Minshew. I'm not thinking right. Will Greer. Right on the outside, number 6. Number 7, despite the fact that his team's been very down, he has been the heart and soul of his team. I got to go with Jonathan Taylor. What he has done this season has been tremendous, and I'm very impressed. Number 8, give me Quinnen Williams from Alabama. He's been the most dominant defensive tackle I've seen. in a little bit of time. Since maybe Ndamukong Suh, I don't know. So he's at number 8. Number 9, Darrell Henderson from Memphis. What a game he had today in a losing effort against UCF. Tremendous player. And number 10. And again, you got to continue thinking outside the box and just stick with me on this pick here. But number 10 on my Heisman list has got to be, and he's the most valuable player on the team. He makes his team what it is. Marcus McMaryion. Fresno State. I got to start talking about him possibly receiving a few Heisman votes just because Fresno State really is not that good. And he's not putting up numbers like crazy, but he's really the catalyst to it, making them a lot better of a team than they really should be roster-wise. I got to go with Marcus McMaryion, despite the fact that he does not have the stats. I hope I'm not missing anyone because I'm just doing this at the top of my head, man. So I'm going to run through 5 through 1 right here. Number 5. And honestly, I'm debating in my head right now 2 and 1 because I think 2 and 1 might surprise you, but 2 and 1 is really surprising. So number 5, I have Gardner Minshew, who edges out Will Grier to be a Heisman finalist. Number 4, give me McKenzie Milton. That team really only won today, I feel like, because they had the emotion of playing for McKenzie Milton today. They probably would not have won if McKenzie Milton was suspended or something like that, or where McKenzie Milton wasn't on the field for other reasons. Probably wouldn't have won. McKenzie Milton is the most valuable player in America to me, and this isn't the MVP. So I'm not going to give it to a guy. I'm going to give it to who I think is the best college football player, and my best college football player, I'm not going to be. You have to back it up with stats. Number 4, give me McKenzie Milton. Number 3, Alabama fans, don't be mad. Tua Tagovailoa, and I think he really lost it. It's not really that much of his fault. He was hurt. He didn't have a great game before he got hurt. But when you look at Tua Tagovailoa, it is very hard to give him the number 1 Heisman Trophy. How these other 2 guys I'm about to mention played today, and how Tua Tagovailoa hasn't had that big stage in close games like these other 2 quarterbacks had. And I think that really just eliminates Tagovailoa from the Heisman discussion, at least for this year. And he'll probably be my favorite for next year. And look, it was his award 2 weeks ago. I don't think it's his award anymore. I just don't. And I don't know how the Heisman voters think. They've already sent in 10% of their Heisman votes, which I think is ridiculous. I think there should be a day where everyone has to write it in, submit it. You get it on this day, and you go ahead and mail it on that day. And if you aren't reliable enough to do that, then get your Heisman vote taken away. So I'm assuming most of that 10% is Tua Tagovailoa. So Tagovailoa probably already has, like, just a rough estimate, 8% of the total Heisman vote so far. So he's got a little bit of edge early. Number 2 and number 1 are between Dwayne Haskins from Ohio State and Kyler Murray from Oklahoma. Let's just look at what these 2 guys have done. Kyler Murray has led a record-breaking offense all season. Dwayne Haskins has been a record-breaking player all season. This is almost as hot as a debate as who's number 4. And of course it's not, because what's most important is at number 4. But honestly, when you talk about big stage, big moments this season, Kyler Murray's had to make plays in big moments, but not to the extent of Dwayne Haskins. Big games, Northwestern, Michigan, these last 2 games, explosion. Really, okay, hold on, I'll get to that in a second. But the last 2 games, explosion. They don't win by a wide margin against both of these top 25 opponents if Dwayne Haskins isn't on the field. And they might have 3 losses if Dwayne Haskins isn't on the field. They might. Both these teams would probably say the same thing. If Austin Kendall was there instead of Kyler Murray, they would probably have 3 losses. If you had Tate Martell there instead of Dwayne Haskins, you probably have 3 losses at Ohio State. So you could say the same thing about both players, but I think the fact that Haskins now has finished the season as strong as he has, with 3 straight games over 400 yards, having, and I'm talking total yards, by the way. He technically was like 4 yards under 400 against Michigan, but total yards, he was past that 400 mark. He had 499 passing yards, I believe, today. Or, well, now, yesterday, as it's 2:19 a.m., and we're almost done here. But you also look, he was able to listen to Ryan Day. He had the poise and the charisma, really, and just able to listen to Ryan Day about the adjustments made on the defense or on the offensive side of the football against Penn State. And you know what? He distributed the ball. And that's what he was asked to do against Penn State. He was criticized for it. And I'm watching this highlight right now on SportsCenter that they're actually showing of Haskins scrambling. That to me was a Heisman moment. And that to me probably was a play. It was the first touchdown of the ball game. And there was more moments where Haskins, he had a dime to Terry McLaurin, and another play where he scrambled, bought time, was near the line of scrimmage, and hit his receiver. I think it was Johnny Dixon in the end zone. He also had a deep ball to Johnny Dixon. That was beautiful. What a game by Dwayne Haskins. And a great job finishing. And Kyler Murray deserves a lot of credit for what was done today. But I just don't think you get a player who's as clutch as Dwayne Haskins has been all season long. In Maryland's when it started, you saw a change in this guy's attitude in the Maryland game. When his team was down 14, guess what he was doing? He was around the fans. He was around his teammates. He was hyping up everyone there. And he was excited because he grew up 20 minutes from that Maryland campus, was originally committed to Maryland because he was intimidated a little bit by the Ohio State brand. Not sure if Ohio State was going to really stick with him. And guess what? Ohio State stuck with him. And, man, are they glad that they stuck with Dwayne Haskins. He is 5th in the last 10 seasons in the most passing touchdowns in a single season. Only 3 touchdowns behind Derek Carr. He's got 1 game. So you get 3 touchdowns, and he could pass Derek Carr. And give me Dwayne Haskins at 1. As good as Kyler Murray's been. I know this was a lot of pro Ohio State, a lot for you guys to handle. Maybe I'm biased. I try not to be. And this is hopefully my unbiased opinion. Thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure you leave a like and comments below. I will see you later.